We have several people here. I think, some people will be able to see each other and others might just be listening in. Um, all right. So we have our author in the room. You can't see him, but he's in there. And we also have somebody in person here too. This is at the Sister Bay Liberty Grove Library here in Sister Bay, Door County, Wisconsin. And our author is a local here to Door County, JP Jordan. And just of the couple people who are here already, has anybody read either of his books? Somebody already said in the chat. And Karen, have you read either of the books yet?
Absolutely, and loved them both.
That's great to hear. And I see there's a Jamie that just jumped in. We were just talking about if anybody's read the books already.
Yes, I have read both. I'm sorry that my picture is like a negative right now.
That's okay. Ours isn't working at all. It's either just audio or just picture. So
Oh, what a bummer.
there must be something weird going on with Zoom today, huh?
Could be.
Yeah. So anybody else that's read either of the books already? Janet, or there's a E. Lombard or Emily?
No, I have not.
Okay.
Yes, I read them. This is Elizabeth. I did read them and loved them both.
Wonderful to hear. Okay. Thank you. And feel free to comment in the chat. And I'm in a different room than they are, and I will try and help get messages to them. I'm just across the hall, basically. So feel free to write in the chat. I do have the chat posted up so they can kind of see it in the room too. And oh, that's right. And we're going to push this to Facebook Live as well. All right. Oh, I don't know the login for Facebook here, so I guess we won't do that part. All right, I'll try and get that from our person at headquarters. Okay, anyways, without further ado, JP, if you'd like to start, or is it okay to say Jim? I know you as Jim.
I've answered to a lot worse over the years, so.
Do you think you can get maybe closer to the TV? It's at least hard for me to hear where you are. Maybe one of the chairs closer up.
Can you slide up?
Yeah, that'll be better, I think. Thank you for being with us today, by the way. And feel free to get started once you're ready.
All right. Again, I think branch started sometime later. That was pretty good. Well, thank you for coming today. I appreciate you making time for this author talk. Want to give you a little bit of background about me that kind of fills in some of the gaps as to how these books evolved. So I spent 37 years in the insurance business, property and casualty insurance business. And if you've read one or both of the books, you realize there's an insurance component in each. I spent over 37 years, 32 of them were involved with niche insurance companies. So most recent 14 years of my career was at a company called Church Mutual. And so we insured religious institutions. And if you read Men of God, you know that was kind of, it was a segment of about religious institutions, and that was kind of the backdrop for the story. The other portion of my career was spent at a company in Neenah, Wisconsin called Church Reviewer Group. And so they are the largest niche insurance company in the United States. And so the backdrop for All In. And so when I started the book, and this book was published in 2021, one of the things, first thing that I did from a peer research standpoint was go back to Neenah and talk to colleagues that I worked with there and did some updating and some research and reconnections. And there's a gentleman there named Dave Sexton. Dave, at the time, was basically an expert. He had been an underwriter. He was a security consultant. He was an expert in security in general. And so it picked his brain on a lot of the technical details. And then went from there and he put me in touch with the FBI, the people that ran the jewelry theft division out of New York. And so I had an opportunity to interview a guy named Dan McCaffrey a couple different times. And he actually, by the time we got done, he had made a couple of suggestions of things that he might see in the book that actually made it into the book that were really good ideas. We also talked to someone in New York City who was basically ran the largest security firm that prepared jewelers in New York City. And he, again, a lot of the technical background, technical detail. And then, of course, I had help from a gentleman named Bill Larson, who was a retired detective from Sturgeon Bay. And he puts me in touch with other people. And so there's an element in this book where there's a person that's, I needed to talk to him because there's an element of texting through the phones and pinging where that phone was when it made its text. And so he was able to give me some technical detail on that. So the books evolved. The first book introduced the character Chuck Nowitzki. And Chuck was the primary investigator in some of the murders that took place in the greater Appleton area. And then I believe he and his partner, Misty Taylor, went to Minneapolis and did some investigating on a homicide there that had a connection to this serial killer that was taking serial killing that was taking place. I guess you would describe Chuck as a pretty hardscrabble kind of guy, not terribly couth, not terribly politically correct, a man with a drinking problem, completed a second divorce, looking for a change of pace, and moved from Milwaukee to the Appleton area, where he ended up meeting Nissa in the first book. And this is pretty much the gang, his gang. I think I would describe her as a fashion model, like that really was a detective. Turned out that she was elevated and moved quickly through the ranks because of what she had done. And they make kind of an oddball partner because he is a slob in terms of dress and she's the fashion book. So, in theory, it all works out. As we go through the discussion today, if you've got questions, just all you have to do is ask. Not too many questions I have heard about the book, or if you have comments about the book, I'd be interested in hearing about that as well. So the storyline itself is about a series of jewelry thefts beginning in Appleton. And most of the stuff are things that I have seen in one form or another, like the cracking of the safe and these large industrial TRTL 30x6 safes, which in theory are impenetrable, but only after 30 minutes. If you have more than 30 minutes, you can get into it. And so the mix of inventory, that type of thing. Certainly, you were looking for something that's going to be eye-grabbing, eye-catching. It's not that that doesn't exist in Appleton or Green Bay, because it certainly does. The values are pretty interesting. But that in the connection to the FBI. And so the FBI is involved in helping kind of more of at an arm's length, assisting the Appleton PD with their investigation. There's a story here about a very large diamond that gets taken, and that was there is a retailer in Phoenix, Arizona, that basically operated that way by appointment only. And once you got in, he had this. It was a 10-carat diamond that he would basically put on people, women, and take a photograph. And it was quite a conversation starter, to say the least. And he was a very high-end jeweler, and catered to the stars. So I guess questions about characters, storylines. Where would you like to take this from here?
From what you just said, And for those people, I live in Door County
Mhm.
and always. And I recognize now that it's a mystery book
Mhm.
and it's a fiction book. But as I read it, I recognized things that happen around here. Okay, so now I recognize why those are inserted and why they show up. So I reckon, and now that you mentioned this just now, if I read the second book, maybe unfortunately I'll be looking for some of those things.
And I think, Larry, you will find other references to Door County. It was harder to work Door County into the second book. It was a little bit. You'll see it more in book 3 that I'm working on right now, in particular book 4, where these characters continue on their path here. But the other thing that's kind of interesting is that I end up putting in the books is stuff that people that really know me. There was a license number in one of the books, it turned out. And it was my grandmother's old phone when I was a kid. And so it was, the license number was the same. We'll put in references to basically there's a character in here known as Mercedes, and there's a reference to my sister-in-law who went by that handle for a period of time. Just kind of fun stuff.
So in your mind, as you're writing, are you inserting this? I'm gonna go for my viewpoint. Are you inserting this in after you're writing, or do you write towards these? Okay, the priest in
In the first book.
your first book.
Yeah.
Are you writing towards him, or are you writing from him? Because I'll just be frankly, basically in Sturgeon Bay, there was a priest that had some of those problems.
Oh, okay. And I was not aware of that.
Okay.
When I wrote that. So, you know, in the first book, was in my head for 4 or 5 years. And when I wrote it, and it took a year to write the first draft. But it went boom, 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 boom. When I got done with the first book and I was looking for a second book, I talked to my daughter and asked her what she thought I should do. And she said, write what you know. And so that was the reason for picking the insurance part. This is the last book that it has an insurance, real serious insurance component to it. But you know, it needed, my wife had encouraged me to get a whiteboard. And so the question of how does it come together? How does the book, you know, are you writing it from one perspective to an end? And it's interesting because for me, I'm working, I've got like a bunch of balls on the board with notes here, here, and here. And then it's kind of like fit the puzzle together for me. How do I put it together? Who are the characters you're going to have involved? And then you're going to get to a point where you go, oh, I need a character for that. And all right, you create them out of whole cloth for the most part. There might be someone that would remind you of this person, but I'll go in and use the internet and name generator and come up with a name. And then you have to remember a character in particular is going to be going from one book to the next. And there are a couple of those characters that continue on, even though they're minor characters, you have to take notes of who they are or what they look like, whatever. And then kind of build that into the story. So the story does evolve on a path that is kind of charted. But when I got through 3/4 of All In, I had this brainstorm and thought about changing up one of the characters. So I had to go back and find this character where it was the reference point. And then I was able to kind of get him through the back door. And make it all kind of fit. And so I think that's the biggest deal. How do you evolve some of these things and, knowing that you've got it written down someplace, but it doesn't always go according to what you've written. Sometimes characters take on a life of their own, which is kind of hard to explain because they take you in places you didn't think they were going to go to.
See, I'm not a fiction reader. But I do read or have read historical fiction.
Okay.
And now I'm putting these two together, and it sort of seems like this is a historical.
It isn't, because you don't have I don't have to worry about any of the actual authenticity of the history.
Okay, you don't have to worry about who shot who or whatever.
Now, if there's a reference to some historical event, that would be pretty close on with that. But yeah, no, this is current day, kind of what you know, or what you don't know, or what you can find out.
It seems like you did do this research for to match, which showed up in your book.
Exactly. And so that's the one comment that I've gotten back a lot of, is that they thought the book was very well researched, both books have been well researched for. And then I was able to put in just enough information to not throw off the story, because there's nothing worse than trying to read a story about insurance. And I had an insurance person come back to me and said, well, ask a very technical question. Well, what about reinsurance? What about that? And I'm like, okay, that's not going to fly in fiction. Nobody really wants to know about it. They just want to know what's going on, that the company is in jeopardy, or the company is going to suffer this big loss, or someone's going to get killed, and nobody really, they want enough background to make it real. Well, that and the temptation is going off the deep end necessarily, and we definitely didn't want to that picture. Even I've been very lucky to be able to find subject matter experts that can take me and answer my questions. There's book 3 that's coming out in October. I found medicals and again through people that I had met over the years. Book 4, the same kind of thing. Now I was at a writers' conference 2 weeks ago. I've been looking for an arson investigator. And I think I made a connection with an arson investigator. And so that could come down with a couple of years too. So yeah, the storyline evolves. I think one of the things that I realized was that just because you've written it so far, it's not, the little man did not carve it in stone, and you can always go back and change it, adjust it, and fix it. Any other questions out there so far?
I just wanted to mention, I love the way you have them set in Wisconsin. As I was reading the first book, I kept trying to picture where you were talking about. And mostly I could kind of figure out. And now the second one is more or less in Door County, and I'm working on that too. I don't know all the places in Door County, but it's very interesting. And I love Chuck and Anissa.
Thank you. Yeah, you'll find references too. You were talking a little bit before about places, and you will find a reference in there to Nagano, Michigan. My father was from Nagano, Michigan. Okay, and so and again, I've been there hundreds of times, and so I know what's going on up there, what's not going on there. But it's that, and there's a character in the book who was an older lady, and it's funny because in fact the character was the Mrs. mother, a grandmother who raised her, and there's a backstory there that you need to look into. But the grandmother looks at Detective Nowitzki and basically says, "We need to get the bastard that shot my grandmother." And my mom called me and said, "I read that," and she goes, "It was something like my mom." So
Okay.
That and my grandmother kind of played into this. There was another story within the book about someone that was in the hospital. And my grandmother had to go to the hospital for some, I don't even remember the reason, but people were very upset when someone goes to the hospital. But my grandmother had the time of her life because she could push the button. She had been living alone, and she would push the button, and somebody would come running to her and then bring her food and whatever else. And some of those stories find their way into the books as well. In terms of how I write, pretty much write 4 hours a day, pretty much from 1 to 5 in the afternoon. Some of it I get sidetracked on because not only am I the writer of the books, I'm the primary marketer of the books, I'm the distributor of the books, I'm the person that bags them up and sends them to people. And that takes time away from either the research or the actual writing itself. On a good day, I think I can write 1,000 words. When I go in the next time though, I spend time going through what I've written the day before. And more than half the time I'm changing and adjusting, and some days I pretty much go, what was I thinking here? This doesn't make any sense at all. So I felt pretty good about it the day before, but then I got to go back and fix it, and then I do that before I move on. And again, that doesn't preclude that there are mistakes in it, because I think the first time when I went through all in, there were like, okay, how many errors are there? No errors. If you spend enough time looking at the book, you just can't see them. Your brain kind of goes right over the top. And someone else points them out, the editor involved pointed them out. I'm like, okay, let me go back and fix it. And even the editor at some point in time loses track. I mean, even the proofreader, and the proofreader missed a couple of things which we later were able to fix. Any question?
I was gonna ask that question you just answered. Can you just sit down and
Some days it goes 1,000 words, like no big deal, and some days it's like 50 words that you can do. So years ago, someone told me when I was working on my dissertation, someone said, do something every day to move the project along. Even if it's looking up a reference with a piece of research, or going and doing just something that just keeps the ball moving forward so you don't feel like you get stuck.
I was told that for myself, you gotta do something every day.
Yeah.
You gotta, even if you don't want to, you have to do something every day.
And that's exactly it.
Otherwise you miss it and then you go to school.
And then it kind of evolves into a week. And so, exactly. So there are days where I do more writing than others. Again, I'm wearing multiple different hats as a small writer. So you got to figure out how to do everything. And, the business side is sometimes the worst part of the whole deal. It's kind of like the punishment for having written a book. Questions from the audience?
JP, this is Elizabeth Lombard. Thanks for getting on the call. I wish I could see you. But that being said, I think when you did something similar to this for Men of God, you explained that you would twist it or change the ending of that book. Did you do the same thing with All In? Was the ending what you thought it would be, or through morphing, did you end up changing it?
That was Elizabeth. That was that. What do you call it? That eureka moment when I realized I could take one of the characters that I had previously introduced and work them into that final that made for a better ending. That final twist that I don't think anyone could necessarily see coming. And so went back and adjusted the storyline, adjusted that person's bio so that it fit and that it was possible that this person could be involved in the final scene. And so, yeah, I think half the struggle with writing the book is like, how do you come to a reasonable ending but you want to throw in a twist or a turn so that, I guess my goal is that you don't figure it out until almost to the last page.
And when you know when you're done.
And, you know, the first book, I didn't know when I was done. I struggled with the ending. An editor finally came in and, you know, told me, I don't like the ending of your book. And I said, you lie. So we had a long conversation about, well, what about this and what about that? And what if we make this person totally different? And the motivation of this is not to save the company, but to kill the company. And that helped bring the thing to an end. The all-in one takes you to a different place, takes you to a different country, and again, without giving away too much of the detail, it comes to an ending where when I got done, I was excited because it was like, to me, the perfect ending for the book. And so I don't know that, how do you know when the book is done? I think when you wrapped up most of the story, you wrapped up kind of the involvement of the characters to a reasonable amount, because stuff's going on in the lives of these characters as well. And that's been part of the challenge, is to how much do you give, how much information do you give about the characters, and how do you continue to develop them? Because it's kind of getting to know people over time, and the more you get to know them, the more you like them, or you don't. And some of those characters you don't necessarily want them to be totally liked. I mean, would you be friends with Chuck Nowitzki? And I don't know the answer to that. And some of these people that, you know, but they're true to themselves. And so it makes it certainly, I don't know, there's a good answer to that. I mean, I'm sure there's other endings that could happen in any book.
Okay, Chuck Nowitzki is in the first book.
Right.
Is he in the second book?
He was the main guy in the second.
You're in love with Chuck Nowitzki. He's gonna show up, did he show up in your third book?
He does, and in the fourth book too. I mean, because I've got enough invested in him. And he's not getting any better. He's sort of the same issues. And it's funny because he runs scared of his landlord. The only thing he's afraid of is his landlord. There's another character in the book named Miss Selma, who is about a 90-pound woman who's 90-some years old and has certain rules that he needs to live by, and he's constantly trying to figure out how to get around those rules. So she's an interesting character as well, and she plays she kind of like the brains of the author there. You know, if something goes wrong, and you know, he'll be talking with her about it, or she'll overhear something, and he'll kind of like steer her. She will steer him on the way. I mean, he's a pretty smart guy, but at the same time, she is like still a force to be reckoned with. That just puts like this the fear of God in the Chuck, and at the same time is an incredibly sharp person. Other questions?
Well, just a comment. This is Elizabeth again. I read about a book a week. Love mystery types of things. So that's why I enjoy your book so much. I often figure out how it's going to end. And honestly, All In took me by big surprise. So well done there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's fine when you're writing something like this too. The challenge to the author is to give enough information, but without giving away too much. And when I finally give away like a real critical piece of information, I feel like I'm like, oh, is it too early in the story? You want to keep people engaged throughout the whole story without giving away the secrets. But you want to kind of pace those secrets along. And I think, at least for All In, I know that I think All In is a better book than the first book. And I think I'm getting better as I go on. This is the first book I wrote ever. And that was, well, first generation was 5 years ago. And now I'm kind of on a pace where I can do one about once a year. Again, the winters are pretty long in York County, so it's not easy. Sometimes those 4 hours in the afternoon turn into 5 or 6 because there's nothing else to do. What else? What else is on the agenda today? Talked about writing, my I guess writing style, writing how I go about what I do. Storyline's characters, again, you know, one of the interesting things I keep finding with characters is, even though I'm using the name generator, I find myself using the same name more than once in the story. I've got to go back and check myself, make sure that two totally different people aren't named the same thing. And so that is always a challenge. That and coming up again with that wrinkle, that technical wrinkle that no one has ever really thought of, from the research standpoint, in terms of the type of the model of gun people are using. Again, I'm not a gun person, but somebody asked me, in fact, my brother-in-law asked me, how did you learn so much about women's fashion? I know nothing about fashion, nothing about guns. But all that stuff is out there on the internet if you want to go digging for it. I have a couple of other people that are fans and have come back and said, yeah, we really true life based on their experience as well. And then when they're in the development of the book, they volunteered to say, hey, there's certain technical aspects of it they'd be more than interested in helping out to make sure that it's still real, which is always nice to be able to have in your back pocket as well.
There's a bunch of writers up in North County. Are they critical of, as far as you know, are they critical of a person who's just coming into their, hey, take the pulse, there's a bunch of people just a pecking away.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah. It's funny because there's a group that's forming now called the York County. Right? You never get the initials right, but basically it's a collective, and they're inviting people in. They want to do more, and the arts in York County. I mean, you're a painter, you're a sculptor, you do any kind of tangible art. There's a lot of energy around that, and galleries and whatever. They're trying to do the same thing with writers. And I think the one thing that they're finding is there are more writers up here than what they knew to start with. And so you have organizations that feel like go right on York County as well, and a member of that, and you make more and more connections. The goal is to kind of be true to the York County piece, but realistically, you can sell books well beyond the county and the state, even break even.
yeah, North County books they kind of saturate.
Yeah, they do. I think one of the things I was worried about was, are people going to be upset that there's, people are talking about murders and whatever else in these books in Door County, little Door County. And I've never had that comment. No one's ever come back to me and said that could never happen. And in fact, when you start looking at all the other writers up here, there was Tricia Skalka. I don't know if you've heard of her. I think she came out with her 7th book, and they're all murder mysteries and a certain amount of killings that take place in every one of them. And so, yeah, no, that doesn't seem to be, it's not an issue, but it's interesting to see that there is a movement, though, of writers up here that are getting together to basically call more attention to this.
Yeah, I just, a group of people in Ellison Bay, okay, all of a sudden they pull up together, history of Ellison Bay. And you can go to Brussels, and then 2 or 3 groups down there did the same. And they each, I think in Brussels, there's 2 or 3 books that these people, the Belgian people have pulled together. And Ed Carver's got a group. And most of those people are really working in the historic. And since I gave that's my meaning, so I lean towards those, but the mysteries and so forth, like you mentioned, the lady that had 7 books, never heard of her, because that's not.
Right, exactly. It's interesting because my wife's reading a book about the cemeteries of Georgia.
Okay,
And there's another book out there about some of the names that you hear all the time if you live here. And they show up in the book. And who the people that founded, say, Ephraim. The Nelson name, some of those names that, I sit here them all the time, but yeah, there really were people like that said the whole thing.
sure, because that's, when I'd say the Ellison Bay, that's the last one I read. Basically, you start looking for someone that, hey, you knew, and you look for their name.
Exactly.
And so I guess when I read your first book, all these names show up. And that makes reading for me go quicker. And when's the next which we say episode going to happen that we have to run up to Door County for the weekend, that sort of stuff.
Book 3 right now is in process, and I'm almost 2/3 of the way through the editing. We're shooting for an October release. Again, we'll continue with Nissa and Chuck working another case. And I'll be looking for some advanced readers in the near future. But yeah, that, and I can see there's a 4th book that's been, the first draft been done, and I easily got a 5, and it could be 6 in there too.
Excuse me, JP, did you say your 3rd book is going to come out in October?
Yeah, that's the goal.
Oh, Christmas presents.
Yeah,
Yay.
great. Add to your list.
Got it.
Any other questions out there?
Did someone say that your books are coming out as ebooks?
Yeah, we'll be doing a flash sale in about a week. And I believe it's on Kindle. And they'll be coming out on, I think it's $1.99 a title for downloading.
Okay, thank you.
And that will be just for the 1 week.
Is that going to be Men of God or All In or both books?
Both books.
Both books. Okay. Awesome.
Hi, Jim, this is Jamie. I was just wondering, do you need people to do reviews for your books?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. One of the things I've incorporated in actually both books now is I had a flyer printed up to helping people, readers, to remind to go to Amazon and do a review, because it helps improve my status on the Amazon in terms of the sales, the attention I get from them. And so I think the last count I had, Men of God, I think I had 58 reviews, and they're running about 4.7 out of 5. So, you've got a few not so good reviews in there, but the vast majority are pretty good. I think I've got 28 reviews at present on All In, and they're running about 4.8. So again, very good reviews. But if you've read the book and you haven't done a review, if you go out to Amazon, it would be very much appreciated. Thanks for the question. Right. If there's nothing else, we can wrap it up. Christina, are you out there?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
Thank
there
you
are.
so much. Yeah, this was great. We appreciate you joining us, and everybody else too in Zoom land and in person here at Sister Bay.
All right. And again, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.